Right now, we are opening a series this week called Accessories and Accomplices. Can you say Accessories and Accomplices? Accessories and Accomplices. We're in this series right now because we are leading up to the Easter event, up to Resurrection Sunday. And in preparing for Resurrection Sunday, last month I was doing a study through the last days of the life of Christ, and there was something that really popped off the page to me. And it's a couple things. First of all, from the moment of Jesus' arrest to his crucifixion, it was only 12 hours long. From the moment of his arrest to his crucifixion, only 12 hours. And that's not like daylight hours. That's not like 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. These are midnight hours. This is right before midnight till right before noon. If I look over here, how many guys could say, like, I could have literally have gone to sleep with Jesus alive and well and woken up to him on the cross? Like, that's how fast the events of the last hours of Jesus' life happened. And as I was reading over these last events of the life of Christ, there's certain things that sort of popped off the page to me, and one of them was the names behind some of these characters. There were names like Pontius Pilate and Herod of Agrippa. There were names like Simon and Peter, and there's only a specific couple names that were named in these last couple hours. And as I'm reading through these pages and reading through these names, I couldn't help but think, man, what would it have been like to be one of the last names of the people written about to know Christ as he's walking up to the cross. And so for the next 6 weeks, we're going to be looking at these different characters, because I love a good character study. We're going to be looking at these different characters and the role that they played in Jesus' walk to Calvary. And so we're going to be doing this for 6 weeks. We're going to be on Simon, which is the week before Easter. And Simon's character is actually helping Jesus carry the cross to Calvary. And then that Friday, we're going to be having a Good Friday service in which we are going to be celebrating, celebrating and mourning and reflecting on Jesus' sacrifice. And then, of course, that Sunday is Easter Sunday. And so we are it's going to be a nice little seamless process, really looking at the last hours of the life of Christ here through the characters of the names in these last couple chapters. And so first today, we're going to be looking at a man named Judas. And of course, everyone knows about Judas, right? What did Judas do? He betrayed Christ, right? He betrayed Christ. And it's interesting that everyone knows that Judas betrayed Christ, because that's how he's introduced. How would you like to be the guy that was always known as the guy who betrayed Christ, right? It kind of reminds me of Aaron Burr, right? Anyone seen Hamilton, the musical? Anyone yet? Anyone wish they could, but they got priced out? Yeah. If anyone has an extra ticket or two, hook a brother up. Because I would love to be able to go and see Hamilton, and particularly take my wife, because she's kind of a musical geek. And so she's played me some of the music and some of the soundtracks. And I was thinking about Aaron Burr in the first song. Different characters are introduced, like, I'm the one who fell in love with Alexander Hamilton, and like, I'm his mom, and it sort of goes through all. Obviously, I deserve to be on the cast of Hamilton. And so it's going through all the different characters and how they were related to Hamilton. And then it gets to Aaron Burr, and he goes, and I'm the damn fool who shot the guy. And then it goes, boom! And that was a quote, by the way, cussing in church. But its hindsight is always 20/20, because throughout the entire play now, you are looking at Aaron Burr as the guy who shot Hamilton. And you're always looking at Judas as the guy who betrayed Jesus. Hindsight is always 20/20. But as you look at the life of Judas, it's incredible how oblivious everyone was to Judas's intentions, but Jesus. And so we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 22 here, starting off in verse 21. The setting is this. The disciples and Jesus, they're around a big table, and they just partook of communion. This is my bread, and this is my body, broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And then in this moment, Jesus is going to say something that is going to make this dinner party extremely awkward. And it's going to start off here in verse 21. And Jesus says this, but sitting here at this table, sitting among us as a friend is the man who will betray me. For it has been determined that the Son of Man must die. But what sorrow awaits the one who betrays him?" The disciples began to ask each other which one of them would ever do such a thing. In the weeks that come, we're going to be looking at characters who lie to Jesus. We're going to be looking at characters who deceive Jesus. We're going to be looking at characters, who insult Jesus. But I don't know about you, but there's one that stings more than the rest of them, and that just has to be betrayal, right? If you look at great storylines, great motivations of great people, I think that betrayal, revenge, and love have got to be the greatest three themes of a motivation of why someone does anything. And here, there is betrayal that is about to happen. And twice he said, there is someone sitting as a friend who will betray me. What sorrow awaits one who betrays him. There's a couple reasons I think why betrayal stings more than just any ordinary sort of hurt or any sort of insult. The first is that every betrayal has a beginning, right? Every betrayal has a beginning. A true backstabbing is made with time and relationship and trust, right? Every good betrayal, every good backstabbing has a backstory. Because you grow to be vulnerable with a person. You grow with this person. There's memories always associated with a good backstabbing or betrayal. Another reason why a betrayal hurts more, I think, than the rest is that betrayals require proximity, right? A good backstabbing requires you to trust someone enough to turn your back on them, right? And if you're going to have a literal backstabbing, you have to still be at arm's length of the other person. A good backstabbing is usually done in the same room. It's never usually done, over the interwebs. That's usually bullying, but not backstabbing. Backstabbing is like, I see the white in your eyes, and I'm still going to hurt you. And so I think that's why backstabbing hurts really, really badly. Because there's always a good backstory, and there's always a proximity that is connected with this. And so as I look at Jesus around this table with these disciples, saying that there is someone here who is sitting as a friend that's going to betray me, woe to you, whoever is going to betray me, it shocks me that Jesus chanced betrayal if it meant keeping Judas close. Judas chanced betrayal. He risked being betrayed if it meant keeping Judas around the table. It's incredible how Jesus spent these moments around this dinner table with Judas. It shocks me that Judas was still at the table. The table is a sacred space, is it not? A dinner party is a place, is almost like a faith community unto its own. You are breaking bread with one another. You are having a spiritual connection over your hummus. And there's just this emotional connection you have here. And Judas is still at this table. Even leading up to Judas's worst moment, Jesus was still at the table with him. And it leads me to believe that Jesus doesn't remove people who haven't removed themselves. I got to look at my own situation. If I knew that one of my close friends was going to betray me, I'd be really tempted to remove them before they removed me, right? Anyone else here in this room? Say, I would remove someone, I would sabotage a relationship, I would defriend them, I would create space with them if I knew betrayal was just around the corner. But Jesus chanced betrayal if it meant keeping Judas close. It also shocks me here that Judas was warned up until the very end. He was warned up until the very end. Jesus says, but woe to the man who betrays him. Any attempt to sort of romanticize Judas's betrayal is shipwrecked simply within this statement. Mark, in his gospel, he adds that Jesus said it would be better for him not to even have been born if he did. Judas himself was committing himself with his own actions. This is a perfect example of how divine sovereignty and human responsibility exist alongside one another, right? Because Judas was the one that was going to betray him, but still Jesus within this moment was warning him not to betray him. Jesus doesn't use hyperbole or flattery in describing sin, but Jesus is fighting for Judas until the very end. Jesus is giving Judas chance after chance. One of you is sitting here will betray me. Woe to you before you betray me. In just a moment, we're going to see them in the garden, and Jesus is going to say to Judas, are you really going to betray me with a kiss? Time after time after time, Jesus is giving him the chance, the out. But I look at myself and my situation, and if I knew betrayal was just around the other corner, I wouldn't be so anxious to give second chances. I wouldn't be so anxious for someone to come clean. I wouldn't be as graceful when someone was looking for repentance. Vengeance would be on my mind. Revenge would be on my mind. Justice would be on my mind. But Jesus chanced betrayal if it meant keeping Judas close. Betrayal, of course, like what we said, it means that there has to be beginnings, and it means that you have to keep someone close. And so, for some of us, we've been betrayed, we've struggled with something, it's hurt a lot, and we've learned then to self-preserve, keep people at a distance. We've known what it was like to be betrayed, so we won't let ourselves into that sort of situation again. And so I have sort of a frank question that I've had to ask myself that I'm going to ask you now. Do I keep people close enough to be betrayed? Do I keep people close enough to be betrayed? Obviously, Jesus didn't develop this relationship with Judas so that he could be betrayed. No one in this room would intentionally build a relationship so that it can destruct at the end. That's not the purpose. But if we are being so self-preserving that we are not letting anyone in, we are not being vulnerable, we're not allowing ourselves to be grace-filled, we're not allowing ourselves to be transparent so that we can't even be betrayed if someone was trying to, I think that may not be the kind of love-life relationship that Jesus displayed for us. Jesus risked betrayal if it meant maintaining the relationship. He gave Judas time and time again the chance to come clean, the chance to come out, up until the very end. The point is this, is that love's capacity outweighs betrayal's damage. And that's why Jesus hung on. Because as much as betrayal stings, love heals more. As much as you've been hurt, God's love heals more. As much as it sucks, as much as it's hard to develop authentic relationships because of that betrayal, love outweighs those things. The chance of betrayal can't match the capacity of love. And that is why Jesus hung on. That's why he stayed at the table. That's why he gave him chance after chance after chance. There's one part of the story that I just can't shake in this moment. Picture with me being around the table with the disciples and Jesus, and he says, there's one of you that is going to be betrayed. And in this last verse, Luke says, the disciples began asking each other which one of them would ever do such a thing. Who would ever do such a thing? Right? This is before he shot the guy. This is before he was introduced as the one who betrayed. Who could ever do such a thing? It's incredible to me that Jesus saw what the disciples couldn't. The disciples assumed the best. They kept people close. and they were blindsided when things went sideways so quickly. I know what it's like to feel blindsided, right? A marriage that you assume was rock solid just starts falling apart before your very eyes. A person who you trusted violated someone that was innocent. A friend you love is living a second life without your knowledge of them doing these sort of things. And in these moments, when we learn of these certain things, we end up asking ourselves, who could ever do such a thing? Where in the world did that come from? And these sort of situations have us perplexed, and they have us sort of baffled. And we say, like the disciples around, who could ever do such a thing? And until it happens, we can't even believe that it would ever happen in this sort of situation. I'm sure that in that moment, the disciples assumed that they were immune from temptation. They were immune from betrayal. Later on, a couple hours later, Jesus is in the garden with a couple of his disciples, and he says, "Hey, come and pray." And Jesus goes off and he prays, and he comes back, and the dudes are sleeping. And so we're going to be picking up here in verse 45. And it says, "At last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. 'Why are you sleeping?' he asked them. 'Get up and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation.' But even as Jesus said this, a crowd approached, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. It's incredible. One of the 12 disciples. They're even associating him with the disciples here, even in this moment. He is still one of them. Judas walked over to Jesus to greet him with a kiss. But Jesus said, 'Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?' Up until the very last moment, he was giving him a chance. But as Judas was walking forward, Jesus was looking at the disciples and said, 'Pray that you would not give in to temptation.' But sleep was so much more attractive in that moment. It reminds me of a warning that Paul gave to the Corinthian church about temptation. If you think that you are standing strong, be careful not to fall. If you think that you're standing on solid ground, if you think that you are immune, be careful that you will not fall. The temptations in your life are no different from what other people experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. I want you to consider 3 of these verses that we've read today. Luke 22:23. The disciples began to ask each other which one of them would ever do such a thing. Jesus says, "Get up and pray so that you will not be given into temptation." 1 Corinthians, the temptations in your life are no different from what other people experience. The disciples assumed that they were immune. Jesus warns them, saying, "Don't give into temptation," and said to pray. The temptations in your life are no different than other people's temptations or what other people are able to do. It leads me to this point, is that temptation is most dangerous when you assume that you're immune. The moment that you assume that you are immune from this struggle, the moment that you think that you have a free pass from this thing, the moment that you think that you are higher than this kind of evil, is the most dangerous place that you can be in. If you think that you are standing strong, be careful not to fall. Pray that you would not give in to temptation. Who amongst us would betray Jesus? I have a personal expression that I've sort of made one of my mantras, and I hope it doesn't come off as masochistic, but I am capable of every kind of evil. And so when something comes out on the news that this person who is highly regarded ended up doing this terrible stuff, you're like, oh man, I can't believe how they could just do that. In my mind, I remind myself, I am capable of that. When we look at someone, it's like, man, how could that marriage fall apart like that? How could this person treat this other person like that? How could this person make that kind of decisions? How could they betray them or lie in this way or deceit in this way? And I have to remember, I am capable of that. if you think you're standing strong, be careful not to fall. Like I said, I don't mean this in a masochistic way, and like all depravity, I have no hope, because Paul reminds us that God is faithful. And ultimately, it's not in your ability or my ability to muzzle my actions so that I won't fall in temptation, but it's God's faithfulness that enables my out. And so, Paul reminds us, he says, be careful that you would not fall into temptation because God is faithful. He will not allow your temptations to be more than you can handle. And when you're tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. It leads me to believe that when God sees that you need an out, he pulls you in. You and I, in those moments of temptation, when we are tried, when we're tempted, and there's an out, there's always an out. And I find that in those moments when we need an out, he's often pulling us in. For Judas, when Judas needed an out, Jesus was pulling him closer, right? He got him around the table. He was pulling him in. When the disciples were about to fall into temptation, he began to pull them in. No, come in and pray. When you and I, when we need an out, when we are being tempted and we're going to fall, rather than pushing us, when we need that out, Jesus is trying to pull us in. He's trying to pull us in into those moments. I find that for myself when I'm walking down a familiar path and I'm about to do something stupid. There's usually some sort of like glitch that happens. And if you're aware and if you're paying attention, if your mind's sort of on this verse and you think, okay, there's always a way out, I usually find that there's a way out. Usually there's some sort of glitch, like almost like the Matrix glitch, right? There's like that little thing, and there's just a moment where something happens where you're able to walk out if you need to. Nothing ever moves so fast that you can't stop the moment. Nothing ever moves so quickly that you can't intercept the moment. And there's usually that glitch. And in that moment, Jesus is trying to pull you in to give you an out. And Jesus creates these moments, these opportunities for out before Judas betrayed him and before you and I would. The temptation for us is to think, who would ever do such a thing? But as the disciples have learned, any one of us could. It could have been any one of us. So stay awake and pray. If you're feeling secure, be careful that you don't fall. There's always a way out. There's always a way out. Right now in these final moments, I know that as we talk about temptation and failing and betrayal and these sort of things, I know that automatically our mind can go to the worst kind of place. It can go back to the time that we repeatedly failed or completely, kept on tripping over ourselves, a habit or addiction that we just can't seem to get rid of. And I say these words and I preach this message not in depravity, but in hope. Because God is faithful. God is faithful. I would say that the worst thing that Judas did is he didn't stick around long enough to know that salvation was for him too. And for you and I, if you're in a place where you're struggling to know your belonging, you're struggling to know God's love, His salvation is for you. I love this quote from Bob Goff. He says, "Love breaks our fall, but grace carries us home." When we fall, love is there to break our fall. But grace is what's going to carry us home when we're too tired to get up. Will you stand with me?